And
All right, welcome to this live. This is what has happened so far. Arvind Kejriwal, the Chief Minister of Delhi, is ignoring the summons of the Enforcement Directorate, saying that he believes that the entire investigation is a scam. He said he's willing to answer a questionnaire, but the whole idea here is to arrest him. Last night, there were various Aam Aadmi Party leaders who had actually taken to Twitter to say they believe that Arvind Kejriwal would be arrested by the Enforcement Directorate today. It hasn't happened yet. So that's what we're taking a look at. The question that we're asking is this one: why is Arvind Kejriwal ignoring the summons, given that he's already sat down with the CBI? Why isn't he sitting down with the ED? Two, is the ED likely to arrest a sitting chief minister for not coming in, based on their summons on the third time? Is that likely to happen? It may be a political move on Arvind Kejriwal's part as well. Also, the question to ask at this point: Manish Sisodia, Sanjay Singh of the Aam Aadmi Party already in jail for several months. No evidence has been presented so far. And is the process being used at this point to punish them politically? Should these organizations be required to provide evidence, for it? And remember, now it's past 7 p.m. in the evening, so is it likely to happen today at all? These are all questions we're asking, and to help us answer these questions, Mr. Kailash Vasdev, who is the senior advocate with the Supreme Court, joins us right now. We had begun this conversation. We had some technical problems, so we're starting it up again. So you'll forgive me, Mr. Vasdev, for asking the questions one more time.
No. My apologies for the confusion.
No problem. My first question to you, like I asked you earlier, is the ED likely to arrest Arvind Kejriwal? It's past 7 o'clock today, which means they're not going to be expecting him to respond to the summons. What is likely to happen now?
See, in the system as it prevails today, normally arrests are not made at this point of time. It's a matter of, it's a question of the timing for what purpose it is intended. But in this case, summons have been issued to Mr. Kejriwal to participate in the investigation process. Investigation under the Criminal Procedure Code of the old similar Criminal Procedure Code is governed by Section 156. Let me just read it to you for your convenience, because that will clarify position as to what is the investigation to be done by the police. The provisions of investigation is Procedure for Investigation 156, 157. If from information received or otherwise an officer in charge of a police station has reason to suspect the commission of an offence which is empowered under 156, he shall forthwith send a report of the same to the magistrate empowered to take cognizance, or shall depute one of his subordinate officers, not being below the rank as the state officer may prescribe, to proceed to the spot to investigate the facts and circumstances of the offence, provided and so on and so forth. So he will now send an officer for the purposes of making inquiry into investigations. What is the investigation is then specified in 156. 156 says that insofar as investigation is concerned of an offence by the police powers to investigate a cognizable case, any officer in charge of a police station may, without the order of a magistrate, investigate any cognizable case which a court having jurisdiction over the local area within the limits of so on and so forth. No proceeding of a police officer in any such case shall at any stage be called in question on the ground that the case was one where the officer was not empowered. So these are the powers you have. I'm giving you this background to understand the next issue. He has the powers to investigate, but the question is, does he have the power to take the law in his own hands in arresting a person? The arrest will then follow if a particular direction is obtained from the magistrate or the court concerned. In this case, we have had 4 arrests. Manish Sisodia being the senior most, plus others have been taken into custody. 3 or 4 arrests. Question is, why are you going after the chief minister? The allegation is that he is also involved in this 290 odd crore scheme in which he's pocketed some money or made some money. But it has been going on for a year and a half. In the year and a half, what is the evidence you have filed in the court with regard to those people who are already in custody. You must find some evidence, some situation in law to continue the incarceration of an individual. It cannot be permanent. As I was telling you a few minutes ago, there have been cases where people have been in custody for 20 years. In cases filed by the CBI. There was the Punjab case in which lands were purchased all over the country. It is still continuing in a public interest litigation. In 1994-95, Justice Khalid of the Supreme Court said, please get this over to the CBI to investigate. Investigations went on, arrests were made in 98. Those poor fellows are still in jail. It's a land scam. You've kept them in custody because the land scams and the monies are huge. Therefore, the law has to draw a line someplace as to how long you can keep a person in custody and for what purpose. Charge sheets are to be filed within 90 days. A charge sheet is filed, followed by supplementary charge sheets. So, you see, it's becoming a very ambiguous situation, if I may say so, in such matters, and it is time that the court started drawing a line. The arrest of Mr. Kejriwal in the present circumstances is imminent. It will happen, whatever be the reasons, but he is bound to be arrested in the circumstances in which we are placed. Question is, do you arrest a chief minister? Do you arrest chief ministers of other states where there have been scams? Can you arrest the many chief ministers against whom scam cases are pending? You have the cases below the states below the Vindhyas. Cases are pending. You had cases against the chief minister who lost. You didn't arrest him. You have cases against other chief ministers also. You have been able to arrest them. So why this emphasis on trying to get hold of the chief minister of Delhi? He's also a chief minister. He's been elected. He won at the hustings in the trust of the people. This is where the questions are today arising as to how much and how far should we go in such matters. Faye, you're inaudible.
As a senior advocate in the Supreme Court who's watching our judiciary carefully, and you know the kind of cases that are coming through the system, do you believe the ED, the CBI are being used politically in this matter and in other matters?
You see, this has been a feeling for a long time, and this is nothing new. The use of the enforcement directorates, the use of the police, the use of the CBI for these purposes has been a matter of judicial comment for a long time. There are judgments galore which deal with this issue, which point out this bad investigations, but yet arrests are being made. So, it would be appropriate at this point of time in our democracy, which is more than 75 years old, to look into this aspect of the matter of policing powers. Mm. Policing powers should not be permitted to be abused for the purposes of a vendetta. Now, look at the flip side. Whenever a political party goes to the hustings, it says, I'll make sure that the people who were there in the past, in case I win, will be taken to task for corruption. Give me one state where this has happened. There was a fair cry in Delhi that if we win the elections, we will prosecute all those who are involved in the Commonwealth Games scam. Not one arrest.
Yes.
It was the same situation in Haryana. It was the same situation in the UP states, where we will arrest everybody from the previous governments for the purposes of being in the breach of the law or for money laundering or whatever. Not one case takes place. It happens only for the limited purposes of intimidation before the next election. There are you can look at the history. See Rajasthan, what happened. You see what happened in Haryana. You see what happened in Punjab, Amrinder Singh. He switched parties. You see what happened in UP, the Mulayam Singh group. But eventually nothing happens, you see. Mayawati. Bihar is an example. Assam.
In Maharashtra, Mr. Vasdev, the ED has misplaced the paperwork on Chhagan Bhujbal's case.
That's right. Why? And he was arrested and kept in custody for 2 years after the famous scam as Deputy Chief Minister. And today is Deputy Chief Minister again. I mean, you can't make it a convenient system for the purposes of subserving any purposes. You cannot do it. We have got to wake up to the fact within our judicial system that somewhere, someplace, a line has to be drawn. And if you don't draw a line, this will carry on. And today, politicians are not bothered really. Well, ठीक है, अंदर रख तो देखा जाएगा. कितने दिन रखोगे? And when he comes out stronger, he becomes more difficult. Bhujbal is one case. See the Goa cases, the assembly elections.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing happened in Goa. I mean, it's a sad commentary, and I'm even more sad that in our judicial system we're not able to stand up to this. Well, the big comments are made, but when the orders actually come, you have nothing before you. You've got to stand up. That's democracy. Somebody wins at the election, somebody loses. But does the loser have the right to prosecute the other person because he's got more right? More might? I don't know.
Do you believe Arvind Kejriwal is right in ignoring the summons for the third time round?
Actually, what Kejriwal should have done was participate and say, come talk. And get the whole thing recorded. You're entitled to a recording today. Get it recorded. If he's so right in what he says, come forward, join the investigation, do it. But you see, then he's worried as to what happened to Sisodia. Sisodia did the same thing. He said, I'll talk. He was kept in custody for hours.
Mr. Kejriwal, we aren't able to hear you again. There seems to be a problem with that audio again with Mr. Vasdev, but he was saying very clearly that he believes that there is a problem in how our legal system is functioning, how our investigating officers, investigating agencies are functioning, where they're being used actually politically for a political convenience, and then they withdraw their cases when that political convenience changes. Take for example Chhagan Bhujbal in Maharashtra, who was arrested for a very major scam. He was kept in jail for a couple of years. He switched parties. Now his entire scam has vanished. The ED actually went to court and said they can't find the papers related to his scam, and so they want to drop the case. I mean, that was the argument really placed before, placed before the court in that case. So that's what we've been talking about. We are trying to get Mr. Vasudev to come back. If any of our audience members in the meantime have any questions for us, we could turn this into, there's Mr. Vasudev is back. Mr. Vasudev, can you hear me now? Unfortunately, your audio is not back. No, still not working, sir. I think we
Yes,
can hear you now, Mr. Vasdev.
thank God. Anyway, so as I said,
Yes.
and you're right in what you were observing just now, that cases are dropped and documents are lost and files are not traceable. See, this is what I'm saying. We have got to get ourselves in the judiciary more strengthened to deal with these kind of situations. How do I put it to you? Democracy is not for few, it's for everybody. If democracy is for everybody, the rule of law is for everybody. If separation of powers, it is for everybody. The applications of principles of law is for everybody. Today it is this situation. Tomorrow you have a different political party at the helm of affairs. What happens? Same thing. You cannot permit this cycle of I am the man to be leading the whole system. I often quote with a great amount of trepidation. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Two Popes.
Yes.
It's about Benedict quitting and having a discussion with the cardinal from Argentina. One of the questions Pope Benedict asks is, how do people die in Argentina? Pat comes the reply, they stand on their egos and jump. Now, we are doing the same thing here. What is the difference? We are standing on what we find to be our ego. And there is another fear which is driving everybody today. And all political parties have the same thing. We saw this during the emergency. We cannot afford to lose because we have much to do for the nation. Do you realize the nation is going to continue? There has to be a change. There must be a change. That's the advancement of the system. Patnaik has been in Orissa for 20 years. You've not been able to dislodge him. You've had Bengal with Mamata Banerjee. Good, bad, or indifferent, but they've stayed there. They're always worried about the next steps. Here, we've had 10 years. We had Manmohan Singh for so many years. Eventually, he got washed out. But you see, this is democracy. You've got to accept change and accept it gracefully. You can't hang on. The Telangana election showed you what can happen. You replaced a person who was claiming to have done everything for the new state. He was the first chief minister.
Yeah.
But to accept the fact that somebody may step in is where the problems arise. Our courts are not waking up to the problem. I'm sorry, they're not waking up because a lot of the answer is in the number of under trials in custody. We have more under trials in custody than actual prisoners. Why? Why should the under trials stay there for 4, 5, 10 years when the offense is much less? Allahabad High Court is an example. We have cases in all high courts which are pending for years together. For what? And the under trial, if he's acquitted tomorrow, what happens to his career? He's lost the best years of his life. A politician who's incarcerated and then is acquitted of all the charges, you've ruined his career. So you see, the courts have also to wake up to the situation of under trials. We talk about it. We have D.K. Basu's judgment and so on and so forth. But on the ground, what have we done? These are the issues which are now going to affect us. We've been a democratic country for 75 years. Our flag is flying high. Well, we've got to make sure that the grounds are cleaned up. The CRPC provides for it. I'll study the new procedure laws. I have not studied them. They've just come into action. But the CRPC provides for the filing of a charge sheet, filing of charges, procedures, time limits, and extensions of time. Can you keep taking advantage of it to keep somebody in custody? 90 days, all right. Supplementary charge sheet, more charge sheets. What has happened? The person is in custody. Let him prove his innocence. If he's guilty, send him in for why 5 years? Send him in for 10. But please do something to release those at a preliminary stage of the investigation. Don't use the investigation as a weapon to incarcerate somebody. It is not right.
Well, we have a question from Justin Jacob who says, it feels scary when all institutions are behaving in a biased way. What can a common man even do? How could we ever hope for justice?
I would support Mr. Joseph in saying that be careful. I can't say anything beyond that. Just exercise caution. You never know where the entrapment will come. I mean, I'm sorry to say it, but this is what is happening.
So is it fair, Mr. Vasdev, to assume that now when you say entrapment, it's not even necessary to have done something wrong? One can be framed, process can be used as punishment, just bail hearing after bail hearing, even if, the individual has done nothing wrong?
Ma'am, let me put it to you differently. In these cases which women are fighting against men, they eventually get settled in mediation, but the man's reputation is sunk. There are cases where you file false cases for the purposes of exploiting somebody. They get settled because no evidence is led. Witnesses turn hostile. It's becoming a daily practice. We are using the courts as a tool for the purposes of putting somebody into the wrong place in his life. So many youngsters go through it. Divorces, rape charges, POSCO, and then eventually an acquittal. Either the police must have enough evidence, like they have in foreign countries, that if a police officer has an acquittal in a case which he has filed, he is liable to answer. You have the Royal Commissions. You have authorities which say that a bad investigation leading to an acquittal needs action against the officers. We don't have it in our system. You've got to control the law enforcing authorities to make sure that the charges framed by them lead to a conviction. It is then that you frame a case. In America, it's normal. In all states in the US, you've got to prove your case if you've arrested somebody. The acquittals are bare minimums. There are far and few between. There was a recent case of a man being acquitted 43 years after being on the death row. Rare. But if the investigation shows that there is evidence, only then do they proceed. That is one of the cardinal principles they follow in the criminal justice system. We must enforce something of that sort here. We need reforms.
Mr. Vasdev, what happens if Arvind Kejriwal, as sitting chief minister, is in fact arrested? What happens to the state of Delhi? Who runs Delhi? Will they have to appoint another chief minister in his place?
Somebody will have to come because the political party which is there in Delhi has not been reduced to a minority. They will elect somebody. They will nominate somebody. You have not wiped out the government. You wiped out the chief minister. All right. Somebody will come. You had a chief minister running the government from jail in Bihar for years together. You had that instance. When a lady came in place of her husband.
Yeah. Shreyas Ramesh says, what would the likely next move of the Enforcement Directorate be in response to this continuous absence?
Arrest the man, take him into custody. You will subserve the, you will subserve the purpose for which you are investigating into him.
Do you believe Arvind Kejriwal is courting arrest at this point because it might benefit him politically?
Well, if he wants to benefit politically, he should come in and say, this is my position, you want to arrest me, take me in, let's see what happens. It'll have a more dangerous impact than he can imagine.
And here's my final question to you, Mr. Vasdev. Just a couple of days ago, the President of India signed into law a bill that allows effectively the government of the day to choose the election commissioners. Because
yes, that is a matter which is a very quaint thing, quaint thing which has happened because under the old system, under the Constitution, the Election Commission is an independent body. The Constitution provides that you will frame rules for the appointment of the election commissioners.
Hmm.
No rules were framed after the constitution came in till the present act has come into force. The political parties, in their wisdom, chose not to have a law for the appointment of the election commissioner because they believed that between themselves they could nominate independent people. So, for 70 years, 1950 to 1970, 1950 to 2020 odd, we had no law, no rules, nothing, excepting a convention, and a good convention in keeping the election commissioners above board. In the last 5-7 years, I would say after session, when one election commissioner became three, the problems began. Because you began to pick up people from the services and appoint them as election commissioners. Moment you pick up from the services, appoint them as election commissioners or governors, you lose the constitutional conventions of independence. Sage or saboteur is the question which then comes into place, as once said by Mr. Sorabji in court. You've got to have a sage in constitutional conventions to carry forward the aim and purpose of the constitution. Election commissioners are your sages because they are the independent people who are the biggest and the largest single strength of democracy. Franchise, adult franchise, is the base of a democratic system. Not permitting free and open franchise is the beginning of autocracy. The Election Commission per se, in the discussions in the Constituent Assembly debates, by Ambedkar himself, made it very clear that this should be a commission where the doctrine of separation of powers should not apply. Because it's independent. It's the backbone of your democracy. Today, an act coming in, taking advantage of the provisions of the Constitution that you must have a rule, you must have a law for the appointment of commissions, is a trend which is going to have a very far-reaching effect. Today it is government A, tomorrow it is government B. Third day it's an autocrat who's in power. Your constitution has undergone changes. The constitution has not changed, but the laws have changed. Do we realize what we are going to go? Where we are going to go? Don't think short for yourself, think for the nation. This place will survive. India survived for thousands of years. It will survive for the next thousands. We will be visitors and we will be tested at times by history. The present act, to my mind, is not in the larger interest of a great country called India.
Mr. Vasdev, my sort of blunt question to you is this. In a democracy where the government of the day is allowed to choose the election commissioners before a big election, does that democracy remain a democracy? Doesn't this effectively mean that the government of the day can ensure its own place in sort of an endless cycle?
No, I would have a bit of a disagreement on that. Because the power of the average man to vote, the citizen to vote and choose his own people, is a very powerful reason. Nobody can be confident of winning the next election, however well you would have designed the whole system. Put it to you differently. In many countries, you would have noticed that the courts, the parliament, and the president are on the same side. I mean, or in those countries, the courts don't matter. But when it comes to elections, it is not necessary the man has come back in power. See what happens in the African countries. See what happens in the Middle East. See what happens in Latin America. It's not necessary they will come back. Argentina had a dictator. In Cuba, you've had the situation. So the power of the people is something you cannot remove. That's the basic structure of our constitution. You may have the best of people to back you. Winston Churchill lost the election after the war, didn't he?
Yeah.
He lost it. He didn't believe that he could lose the election. He came back in 52. And he delayed the appointment, the coronation of the Queen. But then at the end of it, in history, he never came back. He came back for one term. So, democracy and the people of this country have their own views and their own positions. They don't get cowed down in the long term. You would have seen ministers falling, ministers going, governments changing, because that is what the people want. Do what you want. Eventually, the hustings tell. Who had ever thought that Punjab would succumb like this? Who had ever thought that you would have such a massive change in this in the states? Look at Maharashtra. Government toppled. Now the position is very fluid. So in a democracy, I'm a die-hard Indian, and I hope till I go to my grave I remain one. I have a lot of faith in our people, in our systems, and I'm sure that the answers will come from the people, because it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Well, on that note, Mr. Vasdev, thank you so much for joining me and answering these questions. And I do hope, and of course believe very strongly in our democracy, and hope that it will find its way. In the meantime, we're keeping a close eye on what's happening politically in Delhi, and whether or not the sitting Chief Minister of Delhi is likely to be arrested by the Enforcement Directorate, given that he has skipped 3 summons, and what will happen to the government in Delhi without its Chief Minister, who's likely to step in. All of that may play out over the next couple of days. In the meantime, remember to download the Beetroot News app for news and updates as and when it happens. It's our attempt to bring you clean news without any sort of opinion, any hyperbole, any clickbaity headlines. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.